Post-exam important issues presentation. Stacey, Ramirez, and Amy Lopez, period 4. Issue number 1, secret detention sites in Chechnya. Back in April, many men suspected of being homosexual in the Republic of Chechnya were illegally detained, beaten, tortured with electric shocks, and held for ransoms at secret prisons. An account of one man specifically who was detained describes that he was beaten with a hose and tortured with electricity. The men detained were also forced to share their contacts of other gay men. Possible solution: the United States or the United Nations could intervene in order to make people more aware of these issues, and federal authorities could thoroughly investigate this incident, release anyone being detained wrongfully, and hold the people responsible for this incident accountable for their actions. Continued. Method for achieving solution. To make our proposed solution a reality, we could email as many human rights organizations or directly contact them as possible to make sure they are aware of these issues and we can help them take action. Since it is harder for students to take bigger approaches, although it can be done, we can start small by getting into direct contact with these organizations and making sure that they're informed and letting them take matters into their own hands, since they do have a much larger extent of resources and therefore a bigger chance of confronting and facing the problem head on. Historical references. A historical reference that is similar to this event are the Nazi concentration camps under Hitler. A lot of people are comparing these secret detention sites to these concentration camps, and the solution that helped end these concentration camps and helped release the people that were in these concentration camps was the intervention of the U.S. authorities in order to release those that were wrongfully detained as well. And our solution is likely to work because it would require the intervention of the same country as well as many human rights organizations in order to take the same successful measures that were taken when people were released from concentration camps. Issue number 2, racial profiling. The unequal treatment of individuals based on their race is prevalent in today's society. Many law enforcement officials have declared publicly that they racially profile people because they believe it is more effective in catching criminals. However, racial profiling does not work. It prevents people from serving the entire community, and it's also morally wrong and very destructive. An example of this is a study that was done by the ACLU from 1995 to 1997. This study demonstrated that roughly 73% of those stopped on Interstate 95 from these years were black, even though they were not more likely to have drugs in possession than white people. So this just goes to show that racial profiling does have a significant effect on who the police chooses to stop. Possible solution. Unfortunately, there is no quick solution to racial prejudice, but there is a more gradual and effective solution that will take a lot of years to be put in place, but it can be done. And it would be to teach about racial equality, morality, and related topics from elementary school to high school in public schools, because racial prejudice is not something that anyone's born with. It's something that's learned at home. So if the public school system, at least in the United States, can integrate these topics into school curriculums, then it can help combat the issue of racial profiling. And law enforcement departments can also train officials before they become police officers or before they're working actively in the field to teach them more effective approaches to catching criminals and teach officials that racial profiling is not correct and not okay, and it's not effective either. Continued. Method for achieving solution. To make our proposed solution a reality, we can make as many people aware about this issue and agree to try to get law enforcement departments to limit the discretion that police officers have in stopping people in the first place. This would eliminate the influence of stereotypes with regards to the official's decision of stopping individuals based on their race in their first place, and it could also decrease the result of the stereotypes and the influence of them. Historical references. The institution of the 14th Amendment showed us that the possibility of ratifying an amendment that addresses racial profiling would not be useful, because in the 19th century, the 14th Amendment agreed to not deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of these laws. However, shortly after, Jim Crow laws socially segregated African Americans, and this is why we would try to spread awareness of the issue and try to teach these issues at school instead. And there's this really good book called Racial Profiling, Everyday Inequality. And so, if you guys want to learn more about this topic, I'd recommend checking out this book because it's very interesting and does a good job at explaining this issue more in depth. Issue number 3, nature and animal conservation. Many species of plants and animals are going extinct at an alarming rate because of the pressure that humans have been putting on this planet. And studies conducted by the World Wildlife Fund have shown that natural resources that we depend upon have declined by 33% since 1970. And we need to take this issue more seriously and conserve these species in order to sustain the natural balance of the planet and conserve the earth as well. Possible solution. What can be done to help is to protect natural areas, restore degraded areas, plant trees, and teach people to be empathetic to the only environment they know of as home. There are already a lot of places, at least in Florida, where you can help restore degraded areas, and they provide community service hours for it too. And people can also donate to organizations that specialize in nature and animal conservation, such as WWF, in order to support their effort to institute programs that help protect rhinos, marine turtles, and other endangered species. And they can also donate to organizations that specialize.
Issue number 3 continued. Method for achieving solution. Join a wildlife conservation organization. Volunteers are crucial in order to save the animals and the environment. Depending on the organization, you can participate in working to protect small plots of habitat, shelter specific animals like whales, scrape the oils off seals, or even establish environmental policies by local government. Historical references. Preservationist Teddy Roosevelt advocated for the new movement known as conservationism during the Progressive Era. At the Conference on the Conservation of Natural Resources on May 13, 1908, he evoked his thoughts about the need to preserve the natural world when he said, "We have become great because of the lavish use of our resources, and we have just reason to be proud of our growth. But the time has come to inquire seriously what will happen when our forests are gone, when the coal, the oil, the iron, and the gas are exhausted, when the soils have been further impoverished and washed into the streams, polluting the rivers, denuding the fields, and obstructing navigation. It is a time for us now to exercise the same reasonable foresight in dealing with our great natural resources that would be shown by any prudent man in conserving and widely using the property which contains the assurance of well-being for himself and his children." Issue number 4. Modern-day slavery. Issue. Hundreds of migrants along North African migration routes are being bought and sold openly in slave markets in Libya. The International Organization for Migration had gained testimony in Libya recently of trafficking victims in Central African nations including Nigeria, Ghana, and Gambia, describing slave markets tormenting hundreds of young African men to Libya. Merid Madani is believed to operate a transnational smuggling operation that takes thousands of African migrants and refugees to Europe. Possible solution. The international community should not only raise awareness but also improve the enforcement of anti trafficking laws. Today, 124 countries have laws that comply with the anti trafficking standards, but laws without enforcement cannot end modern day slavery. Method for achieving solution. Getting Amnesty International to expose the violations happening in Libya, and once it is out there and heard of, the United Nations can go in and decrease the extent of this issue and make sure to enforce the policies to stop these issues from occurring. Historical references. The triangular trade involved an estimate of 17 million men, women, and children to be deported from their homes and sold as slaves, not including those who died aboard the ships and in the course of wars and raids connected to the trade. Issue number 5, sweatshops. Issue. Garment workers in sweatshops are being paid less than minimum wage, instead paid based on number of items complete per shift, forced to do overtime, are sexually harassed, and are injured regularly. When managers think the workers are not working fast enough, they soon start yelling at them. Workers at a factory in Mexico making collegiate apparel for Reebok and Nike have said managers there regularly hit them and slap them, according to the Workers' Rights Consortium. Most garment workers are women in their teens or 20s who have left their homes to earn money to send back to their families and have been sexually abused. According to the National Labor Committee, a worker in El Salvador earns about 24 cents for each NBA jersey she makes, which then sells for $140 in the United States. In developing countries, it is estimated that there are 250 million children ages 5 to 14 that are forced to work in sweatshops, working 16 hours a day and can earn as little as 20 cents. Possible solution: encourage people to be more aware about the cruel conditions in sweatshops and also exploit the big companies using them. Method for achieving solution: boycott products made in sweatshops or join the movement in pushing companies to stop working with outsourced partners who do not follow fair and legal labor codes. Organizations like USAS, United Students Against Sweatshops, are working hard to build a global labor movement that can fight against industries worldwide. Historical references: the 1916 Keating Owen Child Labor Act was passed during the era of the progressive movement that restricted many hours children were allowed to work by prohibiting the employment of children under the age of 14 in factories producing goods for interstate commerce. It was the first law regulating child labor which was passed by President Woodrow Wilson.
Yeah.